Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of the Heart Containers podcast, a daily Nintendo show where Monday through Friday we discuss the latest news, games, releases, events, and other sorts of topics that all relate to the world of Nintendo. I'm your host, Rami Fawaz, and you're listening to the show for Thursday, January 30th. We have a lot to talk about today in terms of news that got announced not only early in the morning, but what happened yesterday. There was quite a few things. It started off as what I thought was going to be a very slow day, but Nintendo actually released their updated financial data for last year. We have numbers that go all the way up to December 31st. Basically, the entire calendar year of 2018, we have new software, hardware numbers, and some announcements that they just revealed to us. So we're going to get into that with the news. And then after that, we're going to join our topic of the show, which is all about the closing of the Wii Shop channel. It's the end of a digital era for Nintendo. And with that, there are a bunch of games that you will no longer be able to play after yesterday, which is when it officially closed. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things today. But before we do that, this is your reminder that Heart Containers is a solo podcast, and I would love for you all to join in the discussion by reaching out to me and letting me know what you think about any of the things that we talk about, or to suggest things that we can talk about in a future episode. And the way you can do that is by emailing the show with the address heartcontainerspodcast@gmail.com, or if you want to be more intimate, you can reach out to me personally via Twitter, where my handle is @RomeFawaz. That's @ROMEFAWAZ. So I narrowed it down today to 5 things that I think are worth talking about. And one of those things has to deal with what I was talking about earlier with Nintendo releasing that updated financial information, but we're going to get to that in a bit. We're going to start off with something that kind of ties into what we talked about in yesterday's episode, and that's the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate 2.0 update. I was very excited about this update, as was a lot of people. I mean, it's a new character. It's the first DLC released for Smash Bros. Ultimate to start off the rest of the DLC. The problem is we're probably going to get another update very soon because there is a glitch. There is a bug with the Piranha Plant character. There have been multiple reports that Piranha Plant, if you use that character and play him in All-Star or Classic mode, that it can corrupt your save file. And when I say corrupt your save file, I mean fully corrupted, like resetting back to square one. The people who have ran into this bug are reporting that they go back to their game and they notice that all of the characters that they unlocked no longer unlocked anymore. It's just the standard characters that were there when you first started playing the game. And I'm also inclined to believe that this affects your spirits as well, which can be very frustrating because unlocking the characters, if you really want to just focus on that part, wouldn't take you that long. You could probably get back there in a day. But all the progress you made in World of Light, as well as any spirits that you captured during the Spirit Board mini game, and any ones that you might have garnered with the Spirit events that have a timed aspect to it. So Nintendo has already had multiple Spirit events, and if you participated in those events and got spirits, well, they could go away if you choose to play Piranha Plant in All-Star or Classic mode. It's not exactly that simple. It's not like everyone who's playing Piranha Plant in All-Star or Classic mode is running into this. That's not the case, but some people are, so we don't know the exact triggers, and this is your warning. Please, if you care about your save data at all, I would not use Piranha Plant in either of those modes. In fact, I would stay away from Piranha Plant in general because we don't know exactly how to reproduce this. There is always a chance that no matter what you do with Piranha Plant, that the character itself could have the bug and it could trigger this in some way, shape, or form. So if I were you, I would not play with him. I would wait for Nintendo to release the 2.01 update or whatever it would be to fix this bug. So again, if you have updated your software for Smash Brothers to 2.0 and you have Piranha Plant, just be careful and keep your eyes open for updates. So the next story I want to dive into is about THQ Nordic and how they accidentally revealed the existence of Darksiders Warmastered Edition for Nintendo Switch. How do you accidentally reveal something? Well, you upload the trailer to your website which releases it to the general public, and then you realize, oh, we were not supposed to do something like this. And that's exactly what happened for this game. There was a full trailer for Darksiders Warmastered Edition. If you don't know what that is, there was a game called Darksiders that came out in 2010. They remade it, or not remade it, they ported it. So that's a re-release. They re-released it and called it Darksiders Warmastered. So they gave it a silly name. I guess it was supposed to mean Darksiders Remastered, but they were trying to be clever. And when they remastered it, they released that one in 2016 for the PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Wii U. So this wouldn't be the first time that this game comes out on a Nintendo console, because it came out for the Wii U. And now, apparently, it's coming to the Nintendo Switch, or at least not officially, but kind of officially. It was placed onto their website, but then immediately taken down. And the video was actually removed and replaced with a GIF. THQ was kind of having a little fun with this news, and the GIF was it was a GIF of a man saying, quote, "Please disperse, nothing to see here." And if you look in the back, that's the end of the quote. And if you look at the background, there are explosive lights and just chaos happening behind the man. So they are clearly just having fun with this news. But to me, that kind of, I mean, isn't that kind of weird? Your game just got leaked, or the announcement for your game got leaked. And instead of doing one of two normal things that I would imagine that you might do at this time, they're kind of playing it in the middle. And what I'm saying is, if I'm THQ Nordic and my game trailer, which is plain as day, you can go watch the game trailer right now, has blatantly announced that this game's coming out for the Nintendo Switch, I would either A, jump ahead of it and say, okay, yeah, you were right. We were planning to tell you guys about this at a later time. We can't anymore. Here's the official trailer. Or B, deny, refuse, don't post a GIF that seemingly, that kind of ironically or sarcastically says, oh, hey, no, don't look here. You're not supposed to look here, because you're actually confirming that this is a real thing by doing that. And I would also take down any semblance of this trailer anywhere on the internet, but they are doing neither of those things. You can go right now, like I said, watch the trailer, because many people took that trailer and re-uploaded it in multiple fashions. So they're not necessarily hiding this. The only reason that, maybe not the only reason, but the reason that jumps to the top of my head for why THQ Nordic would want to do something like this is if they made a deal to announce the game in a certain way, but they don't necessarily care that much themselves about how that game gets announced. They just cannot break that deal. So they can't come out now and say, oh, you're right, this game does exist, and here's the actual trailer, because maybe, for instance, they made a deal with Nintendo and said that, Nintendo, you can actually reveal this to your adoring fans and to Switch fans in the next Nintendo Direct, as an example. And now that it's out, they cannot break that deal by announcing it themselves, because they already offered that responsibility to Nintendo, and Nintendo wants to utilize that in the next Nintendo Direct. It would be really interesting to see, actually, combined with the news that we talked about yesterday with Assassin's Creed, if we just are about to get a wave of third-party ports and third-party games that are soon to be announced by Nintendo in an up-and-coming Direct. That would be actually something that I would look really forward to. But who knows? And the takeaway that you should walk away from this news with is simply that this game probably 99% exists. There's no reason to believe that it doesn't exist. And if you were a fan of Darksiders when it came out, or if you're even casually interested in that franchise, it's sort of like a Zelda style franchise, except it has its own twists, then you should be happy about that. The next story that I really want to jump in to today are the results for 2019's GDC, that's Game Developers Conference, State of the Game Industry Survey. So they usually do, obviously, one of these surveys every year where they ask a wide range of developers all bunch of questions to kind of get like the pulse on how the game industry is doing. And this year, they got nearly 4,000 developers, and they asked them all types of various questions regarding how they feel about game development today. And it turns out that the interest in the Nintendo Switch has gone up substantially since last year. 45% of the developers responded by saying that they have an interest in creating games for the Nintendo Switch, compared to 2018 when that number was only 36%. So this is an enormous increase. And why? Like, what is the reason why there's so much more people in 2019, sorry, that's 2018. No, okay, the survey was taken in 2019. About I'm confusing myself. The most recent survey, which was taken in 2019, is 45%. So that means a full year ago they were saying 36%. So that increase is probably coming from another question in which they asked these developers, where it strongly hints towards why people may be feeling this way. And that question was, they asked these developers about performance. How do they feel about the Switch when compared to their competitors, specifically in a cross-platform manner? So you take a game, you release it on multiple platforms. How is the Switch performing for them? Well, if you factor out all the respondents who had not yet done something like that, 78% of developers claim that their games sold at least average on the Nintendo Switch, with 42% suggesting that their sales were actually above average on that console. Okay, so that means that the vast majority of developers who put out games on the Switch and other consoles like the PS4, PC, Xbox One are seeing on par results on the Switch, if not better. I mean, 42%, so that's close to half of them are seeing better results on the Switch. And that means that the Switch is a platform that is performing well for that wide range of developers. Now, there's no clear bucket that you can put these developers in. They're not all indies, they're not all third parties. There's a smattering all across the board. So we can't pinpoint exactly the type of developers that we are surveying, or that the GDC is surveying in this survey. But what we can tell is that across the board, generally, it seems like people are having a good time with the Switch, and the Switch is performing well for them, especially when compared to their competitors. And so that probably leads to why there's so much more interest this year than there was last year in developing for the Switch. And what I like about this story a lot is that it's such a far cry from what we know from the old days of Nintendo. And when I say old days, I really just mean the last two generations, where it doesn't matter who you're talking about. Third parties, indies, across the board, people didn't really know how to succeed on Nintendo's consoles unless you were Nintendo. And even if you were Nintendo, they kind of struggled every now and then. The Wii U was kind of a failing console for financial reasons across the board, Nintendo or not. But even in the Wii era, third parties and indies struggled to figure out how to sell on a console that was 100 million, that had an 100 million install base, and they still couldn't figure it out. I mean, you look at companies like Activision selling Call of Duty across the board. There are way more Wiis out there than Xbox 360s or PS3s, and yet Activision is reporting numbers that the Wii version of Call of Duty sells way less than the competitors. So now that we're in a climate where Nintendo has a console where that's not true anymore for the majority of these developers, there's no doubt. It makes complete sense why the interest would be spiking so heavily, going from 36% to 45%. And what that means in the long term is just good things. I mean, that means in 2019, I guess in the short term rather, in 2019, that means we're bound to see a lot more games coming from, again, across the board. The Last Story is a great example of that. We're going to see maybe some stuff from THQ Nordic. Yesterday with the Ubisoft news, we're going to see a lot more from third parties potentially. And of course, indies especially. We just had that indie highlight where they talked about some. Wargroove, by the way, an indie that's coming out soon. Look out for that. But this is exciting. This is always good for Nintendo, and I'm glad that game developers are feeling positive about the Switch, because that just means we're going to get more good games to play. Now, the latest and greatest news. This is hot off the press, guys. I am not sleeping, or I am up very, very early in the morning trying to cover this because it is very important. But regardless, I'm excited about it because of how important it is. Nintendo just updated their sales numbers to include everything up until December 31st, 2018. Whereas previously, the numbers that we were talking about, the numbers that they've updated us with, only went up to September 30th. So this is a very important pairing of months, October, November, December, that we now have numbers for. And we learned quite a few things because of that. First, they've updated their release schedule for 2019, and I'm going to walk through that real quick with you. I'm going to do the United States release schedule, although if you look at the other ones, they have a European one and a Japanese one. They look almost nearly identical. So the games that have already released are New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, Fitness Boxing, Yoshi's Crafted World. Okay, that game hasn't released, but they already gave us a release date for March 29th. So those are the boring ones. We already got them out of the way. All we know is that, or the only one that hasn't come out yet was Yoshi's Crafted World, and we know that's coming out at the end of March. The next one is Fire Emblem The Three Houses, and it's listed as spring 2019. So that's very likely, or I mean, I guess it's not likely, but in terms of the games that we have dates for, and I guess spring wouldn't be a hardcore date, that is the next one in line from Nintendo. And that makes complete sense to me. I mean, a lot of these make sense to me, but spring 2019, that is the Fire Emblem spot. That is the Fire Emblem spot as it has always been traditionally. It's been that time period. You go back to Echoes, where it came out around spring of 2019, although I think that one was closer to the beginning of summer. But, that time period extends a little bit, so that's not a big deal. And Fates was also around spring 2019. So if I was going to put money on it, I would have said spring 2019 is when we can expect Fire Emblem Three Houses. The next one on the list is Pokemon RPG for Nintendo Switch. That is a hefty name there. I feel like most people just call it Pokemon 2019, but they are still referring to it as Pokemon RPG for Nintendo Switch, parenthesis, temporary title. And it says late 2019. And I would not read too far into what late means. I guess you could say that probably mean that it could mean December in the same way that Smash Brothers released in December. But to me, Pokemon games, just like Fire Emblem, have traditionally released at a certain time period. And it's always been the October-November time frame. You go back at all the mainline Pokemon games. You don't even have to look at the mainline ones. Just look at last year. November was when we got Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. That's the Pokemon slot. It's the best time for Pokemon because Pokemon is such a big deal for Nintendo that they want it to be their holiday title, or at least near holiday. And they've gone back and forth on whether October or November is the right time period. If I remember correctly, Sun and Moon was October. But I guess if I wanted to read into late, I would say that maybe that's suggesting that it is definitely going to be in the November slot and maybe even late November. Maybe we're talking November like 20th or something like that. A date that is obviously before Black Friday because they want to get those sales. They definitely want to get those holiday sales as early as possible, but they're pushing it back maybe because it's not ready. Who knows? After that, you have the rest of the lineup, which includes Animal Crossing for Nintendo Switch, Luigi's Mansion 3, Daemon X Machina, Dragon Quest Builders 2. I don't know why they're listing some of these games here because they also list Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order. I guess that just means that they're publishing it, would be my guess. Those games all just say 2019. I wouldn't read too far into that either because that could literally mean anything. I'm taking it, especially with games like Animal Crossing and Luigi's Mansion 3 that just say 2019, is that they're not ready to reveal those details yet. They still could come in the first half of the year or the second half of the year. I don't think that just because they say no, just because they don't have any firm dates on them, that automatically means that they're going to be coming later in the year. I would not feel comfortable enough to say something like that. And then the last two on the list are Bayonetta 3 and Metroid Prime 4. And we already talked about Metroid Prime 4. They already talked about Metroid Prime 4. Both of them say TBA. And to me, that just means that they announced those games way too early. Way too early. They should have waited until they had something to talk about. I mean, we know that with Metroid Prime 4, but the fact that they're showing Bayonetta 3 and it still says TBA, like they couldn't even say 2019 up at this point, and this was updated December 31st, that's scary to me. And hopefully we hear more about those games sooner rather than later without sacrificing any quality. But I guess the things that we for sure learned with this January release schedule was that Fire Emblem is coming in spring and Pokemon is coming in late 2019. I probably think that it's November. The next thing that they went over were sales numbers, and my God, are these sales numbers really interesting. I'm going to start off by going over the software numbers because they're blowing my mind. We had a shakeup, and who's the champ for the Nintendo Switch? Number one is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with 15.02 million units. 1502. That is a enormously large number of units. And to put that in perspective for you, what Nintendo is saying is that they've sold 32.27 million Switches. So for Mario Kart to have sold 15 million units, that means that almost half of the entire install base owns a game that is a port from the Wii U era. Let that sink in for a second. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is a port, and yet it is not only the best-selling Nintendo Switch game, which means it's probably also the best-selling Switch game, period. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a third-party or indie game that's going to beat 15 million units. But it's a Switch game that wasn't even natively made for the Switch, and it's number one, and that is a testament to how much people love that franchise. Because my God, people love Mario Kart, and we're going to get into that later when we talk about Mario Kart Tour in just a second. But number two is Super Mario Odyssey at 13.76 million, and this one surprises me a bit. This one kind of makes me sad because in September 30th, again, that's when they last updated these numbers. Super Mario Odyssey was sitting at around 12.5 million, which means that in the whole holiday season, even though they sold a ton of Switches, they did not sell a lot of Mario Odyssey, and that lets Deluxe actually pass Odyssey in terms of overall sales. And that kind of makes me sad because Odyssey is a fantastic game, and I hope that all of these new Switch owners are not passing on it because it's old or something like that. I don't know why you would want to pass on Super Mario Odyssey, but it really did not sell nearly as well during this holiday season as I would have hoped it would. But a game that did pick up a lot of new purchases along with new Switches, or the game that I think a lot of people bought rather when they got their brand new Switch over this holiday season, was clearly Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, because it is number 3 on this list with 12.08 million. That is an incredible number. Remember, Smash Bros. Came out at the beginning of December. So this number goes all the way to the end of December. This is less than a month. Less than a month. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is at 12 million and is the third best Switch game in terms of sales. I can't, wow. Like I don't even know what to say about it. I did not expect Smash Brothers. I expected Smash Brothers to do well. I did not expect it to do this well, because at this pace, less than a month being third place, I mean, Smash Brothers could be the best-selling game on this console, period. Let me put this in perspective for you. Fourth place is Breath of the Wild. So right below Smash Brothers is Breath of the Wild with about 11.7 million units. Now let's think about Breath of the Wild for a second. It came out with the Switch, so it's been around for a long time. Not only did it come out with the Switch, it had the advantage of being one of the only games to launch with the Switch, or at least one of the few games that were worth playing to launch with the Switch. So a lot of people who bought a Switch felt like they needed to buy Breath of the Wild with that Switch so that they could validate their purchase. So a lot of people bought the Switch with Breath of the Wild, and there was that wild report that there was that interesting report that came out at the time that said that the attachment rate between Breath of the Wild and Switches in the early days was actually over 100%. That means every single person who had a Switch probably had Breath of the Wild and then some, because people bought Breath of the Wild multiple times. Maybe because they wanted it physically and digitally, or they wanted the digitally and the physical special edition, whatever it might be. Breath of the Wild had the advantage of coming out during a time period where it could dominate everyone who had a Switch and have an over 100% installment attach rate. That's crazy. Not only that, it was an amazing game. It had critical acclaim across the board. People recommended it like nobody's business, and it has had the benefit of not one, but 2 holiday seasons. It's been out for almost 2 years now with 2 holiday seasons. And all of those advantages don't matter at all, because Super Smash Bros. Ultimate comes in early December. It misses the boat on those Black Friday sales, on those really nice, I mean, there's still a lot of holiday sales to be had in December, but man, is that end of November window after Thanksgiving just such a great time to sell stuff. And it missed that boat. And less than a month later, it already beat Breath of the Wild. Put that in perspective for you guys. That very well means that it's on its way to beat Odyssey and beat Deluxe to being number 1. And I can't think of a game that could beat it. Period. I don't know what's going to come out that's going to supplant Super Smash Brothers Ultimate. Perhaps Pokemon? Like maybe that's the game to break it. But then Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee are sitting at 10 million, which, by the way, that's not chump change. That is also a really big number for a game that people were worried about. Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, 10 million units, making it number 5. And then Super Mario Party at 5.3 million units. Those are all fantastic numbers. Nintendo should be really proud of the software that they released in 2018 because my goodness, did they really rack it up. And that makes sense leading into the next half of the story where they're talking about overall sales, and Switch sales were a little bit lower than they anticipated. If you remember, they had this 20 million unit goal before the fiscal year ended. They actually dropped that down to 17 million finally, after having interview after interview where they said, it's ambitious, but we're going to shoot for it. We think we might be able to do it. Well, it's clear that they probably didn't think that they were that much able to do it if they're dropping it from 20 to 17, like not even 19 or 18. No, it's 3 million down from that. But what I wanted to bring up is that although the hardware estimate went down, the software estimate went up. It went up by an additional 10 million. So they beat their software forecasts, and it's very clear why, because they did amazing with their games. With Smash Ultimate, I still can't get over that number, 12.08 million. Wow. All right. Well, the Switch sold 32.27 million, total. That's what the number is at right now, total. At the end of 2018, that is an incredibly respectable number. It's not on pace for what they wanted it to be, because they wanted to sell 20 million in that fiscal year, and now they're suggesting it's only going to be 17 million. But still, that's huge. They're saying that 14.5 million units were sold in the last quarter. In the last quarter, they pushed 14.5 million units. Again, let's do the comparison thing. 14.5 million compared to the 32 million that they've sold overall. That's nearly half. They sold nearly half of all of the Switches that are out there right now in the last quarter. That probably explains why a game like Smash Brothers, which is brand new, which is probably the game that is attracting or is in the face of all of these brand new Switch owners the most, was able to push 12 million, while a game like Super Mario Odyssey, which may not really be in the front of people's minds of whoever bought a Switch in the last few months, only pushed, about 1 to 2 million units. So it's just because they've had such a crazy back end of 2018 that is skewing all these numbers very positively for the software and even the hardware to an extent, but not quite as much as they wanted it to. Those are your Switch numbers. I want to get into what they said about 3DS numbers because those are really juicy too. They said the 3DS sold 2.31 million units. And that probably means nothing to you, but if you want to know what you should know, it's a 60.5% decrease on year basis. What does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. That means the 3DS did, in terms of hardware sales, 60.5% worse in 2018 than it did in 2017. If that's not a sign that the 3DS is on its deathbed, then I don't know what is. And lastly, off of the sales unit, they also tuck this in at the end here just to kind of fill people in about what's going on with their mobile initiative. I mean, Mario Kart Tour was a game that they said was going to come out before the end of the fiscal year. That's March 31st. Still no news about it. Well, they announced that it's not coming before March 31st. Here is the quote. In the smart device business, Mario Kart Tour was scheduled to be released this fiscal year, but in order to improve quality of the application and expand the content offerings after launch, the release date has been moved to summer 2019. As we endeavor to develop future planned applications, we will also focus on continued service operations for applications that have already been released so that consumers can enjoy playing them for a long time. Okay, end quote. That's the second half, obviously, is just saying that we already have mobile apps out there, so we're going to continue to support those in 2019. The first half saying Mario Kart Tour, we said it was going to come out when we said it was going to come out, which was before the end of March. It's not happening anymore. We're pushing that to the summer so that we can improve quality. Wow. That was a surprise. I mean, especially for a game that we haven't seen anything about, and we've known about it for a very long time. I would wager, almost a year now? But maybe that's why we don't know about it. Maybe if they were that concerned about quality, if they're so concerned about quality now, which was supposed to be very close to the release of the game, maybe that's pretty much why we haven't heard anything about the game, because it's not developing well. Or it could be developing okay, but maybe not up to the standards that it needs to be. Because let's think about the mobile platform for Nintendo right now. It's not very good. And I don't mean that as a quality thing. I think that Nintendo just doesn't really know what they're doing quite yet. They're still experimenting in the mobile world. And there's no better example of that than looking at Super Mario Run. Because Mario is king. All right, this is a Nintendo podcast. This is Nintendo World. We all know that Mario is everything. Mario is their biggest brand, and it is an iconic character that probably makes them the most money. We were just talking about software sales, right? What were the top 2 games? Mario Kart, Mario Odyssey. What about their theme park deals, for instance? What do we know about it? It's Mario everything. We've seen Mario, we've seen coins, we've seen pipes. All the rumors are Mario related. What about their merchandise? I'm willing to wager that Mario is the brand that sells more than any other Nintendo IP. Mario, 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 Mario. Everywhere you look, it's Mario. Okay, let's look at mobile. Super Mario Run. By far, the game that makes the least amount of money. Probably also the game that has the least amount of interest and the smallest user base. Everyone else is talking about Pokemon Go, which I know isn't developed by Nintendo themselves, but it's still an IP that is very closely attached to Nintendo, Pokemon. What about Fire Emblem Heroes? People are talking about that one. Pocket Camp gets more conversation and more respect, I think, and makes more money than Super Mario Run. And then you have Dragalia Lost, which I actually don't know much about, but I do know that it also makes more money than Super Mario Run, because everything makes more money than Super Mario Run. Mario Run, for all intents and purposes, especially for what they want a Mario game to be, is a pretty big disaster. So I think, again, not in quality. I actually enjoyed Mario Run, but for what we're talking about, for how popular Mario should be, Mario literally should be number 1 on the iPhone and Android charts at all times. At all times. It just shows that Nintendo is playing a different game. And they need to make sure that they nail this game, that they figure it out. And Mario Kart is a very important brand. It's a very important IP. Again, look at the software sales for the Switch. What's at top? Mario Kart. Because Mario Kart has a very wide appeal. It approaches all types of demographics, and everyone likes to play Mario Kart. And the phone should be the perfect device for it, because the phone is a device that everyone has. So you take a brand that has a very massive appeal and you put it on a platform that already reaches a massive amount of people. That game better smash it out of the park. Because if Mario Kart Tour comes out and does not dominate the headlines and dominate the video game space of phones for a long time, it cannot sputter out. Because a lot of Nintendo games and just apps in general, like Miitomo, Super Mario Run, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, has had really big initial launches where everyone seems to be playing it, everyone seems to be talking about it, and then sputters out like a month later, and no one's talking about it. No one's really playing it. It's only a pretty small, dedicated user base, but the vast majority of people have moved on to something else. If that happens with Mario Kart Tour, I think they're in big trouble. Because especially if you look at that second half of the quote, they're dedicated to supporting these games in the long term. It doesn't sound like they want to reboot it. It doesn't sound like they're planning a Super Mario Run 2 at any time, when in reality, that's probably what they would have to do to reinvigorate the interest in a Mario Run style game at a significant level. I don't think adding more content to Super Mario Run has been doing them any favors in the years that Mario Run has been out. And if Mario Kart Tour is in the same situation, that's really bad. So if they feel like Mario Kart Tour isn't ready, if they feel like Mario Kart Tour is in a position where if it released before March 31st, it would not dominate the mobile space and be the hit game for a long time, then yeah, you better push that back. And that's what I read into this delay. That sure, maybe it works functionally. And if they released it, it would be a pretty fun game, but it can't just be pretty fun. It has to be enormous. So, that's it. That is a lot. Actually, there is so much more to digest in these reports, and if you want to, I totally encourage you to do so, but this is already turning into a really long episode, and I already talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and not everyone likes to get into the nitty-gritty numbers, but if you want to, you can go read about it. It's on probably every major Nintendo site by the time you're listening about this. Otherwise, you can go to Nintendo's IR information, just search that up, and you can read about all the nitty-gritty details. But we're going to need to move on to our final topic and also our topic of the show, which is the Wii Shop channel. Yesterday, it has officially closed down for business. As Nintendo mentioned in an earlier official press release, quote, as previously announced, the Wii Shop channel will close for good on January 30th, 2019. The ability to add Wii points was removed last year, but if you still have any Wii points that you wish to spend, you must do so before January 30th, 2019. Quote, and today is January 31st, 2019. So if you did not know about this news, well, you are screwed for the most part. If you had Wii points or you had to have had Wii points at this point. If you had Wii points and you did not spend them before yesterday, I am sorry. You do no longer have the ability to spend those games. Now, as further clarification, the closure also includes any remaining video on demand services is what they say. That probably means things like Netflix. And then also what's worth keeping in mind is that even though you cannot purchase any new titles on the shop channel, you can still re-download games that you've already purchased until some undisclosed date in 2019. So that means if you've if you bought a WiiWare or virtual console game and you don't have it downloaded anymore, you should go do that now or within the next few months, because they are going to take that mechanic or ability. They're going to take your ability away to do that at some point in 2019, but it is still available. So again, if you've been living under a rock and you don't know or you didn't know about this happening, it's too late to spend your Wii points. It's not too late to download games and put them on an SD card or just put them all on your Switch and save that Switch forever so that you always have the option to play those games. And this, my friends, is our topic of the show, because this is actually a really big moment for Nintendo and for the Wii. And that's because the Wii Shop channel actually has a lot of significance to it. It has a lot of history. It came out very soon after the Wii. It says December 10th, 2006, so almost a month after the Wii, and it signified a really big turning point for Nintendo. I mean, unlike their competitors, who were focusing on developing online stores where they could sell their retail games as well as other games. But at the time period in the Wii era, you could buy fully fledged PS3 and Xbox 360 games on those consoles by just going online and downloading them. I'm like 95% certain of that fact. If I'm wrong, just let me know. The Wii Shop channel did not do that. Instead, it focused mainly on letting people go back and play older experiences with the virtual console, but there was also a WiiWare section. But I'm going to talk about the virtual console first for a second. The Wii, Nintendo's focus with the Wii allowed them to make a console that was more backwards compatible and more respectful of older generations than any console that they've ever made previously, and probably any console that they've ever made since then. Because not only was the Wii backwards compatible, but with the power of the Wii Shop channel and the introduction of the virtual console, yes, this was the very first introduction of the virtual console, you could play GameCube games, N64 games, NES games, SNES games, Sega Genesis games, Master System games, Neo Geo games. It was a real feat to look at. I mean, it was an incredible way to preserve history in a way that Nintendo really hadn't thought about previously. And on top of the virtual console, they had something called WiiWare, which kind of let you play smaller titles, but also titles that were kind of developed just for the Wii. I mean, these aren't old titles. A lot of them were exclusive. There were games like World of Goo, which was a console exclusive to the Wii that came on WiiWare and was a really big deal at the time. It really introduced people to their Wii as a place where you could download games. And World of Goo would go on to become a hit that kind of surpassed the Wii itself. It surpassed the Wii itself, being on various systems, not systems, but it was on PC, it's on mobile, and it has had a very long lifespan and made those developers, I'm sure, a whole lot of money. But there were also a whole bunch of other WiiWare titles that did not necessarily leave the Wii and don't have a lasting legacy in the same way that World of Goo does, but are just fun experiences that we will no longer be able to purchase. And for a lot of people, that means no longer be able to play. One of those games that I like to talk about is called Muscle March, because it's such a weird, whimsical, eccentric type of game that no one really knows about, but it exists and I want to talk about it. It's a game that I bought at one point, and you play as a guy, or actually you can play as a whole bunch of things. You can even play as a bear or an alien. Basically, you're a muscle builder, okay? And someone stole your protein powder and you have to chase them down. And so you use the motion controls of the Wii to make muscle poses so that when, kind of like that one game show where you have to like get into certain angles and poses with your body so that when the wall comes or whatever it is, you can make sure that you'll fall through it. It's exactly like that. So they'll show like a concrete wall, and then there'll be like a certain muscle pose that you have to make. And if you make that, then you'll run even faster and you'll get closer to the guy running away with your protein shake. Or if you miss, you'll get, you'll slow down and you might get further away from him and you might be one step closer to losing. The whole game is played by these massive bodybuilder men who are half naked, and it is just the wildest game idea ever. And the WiiWare is filled with games just like that. But because of this closing, we're not going to play it. So 2016, this launched, and we not only got the benefit of being introduced to these old virtual console games, which let you play games like, I wrote them down, Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3, Pokemon Puzzle League, Super Smash Bros., Sonic and Knuckles. These are games that you actually still to this day are only downloadable on a Nintendo console on the Wii. So the virtual console on the Wii U and the 3DS actually don't even support these games. These are exclusive to the Wii, and I can't say if they're exclusive in terms of like other consoles, other non-Nintendo consoles, but that means now that the Wii Shop channel is shut down, you can't play them. But there are also a whole bunch of WiiWare games, such as Muscle March, which are gone forever as well. I mean, it's not great that this is happening. That's my take on this. I get, that's not exactly a hot take. I'm right along with everyone else and agreeing that I wish there was a better way to preserve the legacy of the Wii, to take games that are on WiiWare that have a lot of history and respect. And I mean, they're not the best games of all time, but games are games, and we want to preserve ideas for the future, especially when they're virtual console games, because no, they're not. These aren't virtual console games, aren't like weird side projects, but they are games that usually are pretty beloved. Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3, it shouldn't be harder today to play those games. It should be easier given all of the stuff that we have, all of the technology that we have. But it is getting harder to play games like Puzzle League and Super Smash Bros. 64, Sonic and Knuckles, Muscle March, World of Goo, all of these games that have come out on the Wii Shop channel. And it's a bummer that Nintendo, even though they were so dedicated back then to being focused on backwards compatibility and making sure that you can respect, their history, it's a shame that that doesn't seem to be where they're going today. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit too, is if the Wii Shop channel is shutting down, is there any hope that these type of experiences can come back? Is there any hope that Nintendo can bring them into the fold in some way, or at the very least prevent something like this from happening? And that's not an easy answer to give, because the virtual console, although it started with the Wii in 2006, that idea is basically bygone. It's basically dead at this point in time. The Switch is not going to have a traditional virtual console. They've said that. So although the Wii U and the 3DS do have virtual consoles that are still open, you can still buy games on those, even though, again, they're not exactly the same games that you can buy on the Wii. When those consoles finally die down, and I'm talking about how the 3DS shop channel or eShop and the Wii U eShop are finally donezo, that's going to be the end of this idea that you can go online on your system and give Nintendo a few bucks and they'll give you an old game and you should be able to keep it forever. I don't think we're really ever going to see that again, because with the Switch, they said that they're not really doing a virtual console. Instead, they're relying on this subscription service, which right now only allows you to play a few dozen NES games. And in a subscription format, you don't own those NES games. You play The Legend of Zelda on NES on your Switch, for NES on your Switch, if you pay them monthly or yearly, or if you're paying them regularly, if you're a subscriber. And at any point in time, if Nintendo decides that you should not be able to play that game and they take it off for any reason, because they didn't promise you that you could play Legend of Zelda in perpetuity, they promised you that you could play it now, and you can play it now. But at any given time, they can take that away. And that's the world we live in today. It's a subscription-based world. We don't own anything anymore when it comes to software. You pay for services, and as long as those services are intact rather, you get to enjoy those services. And it's kind of a piece that I guess we have to make, because if Nintendo is the one moving towards that future, Nintendo of all companies, of all gaming companies who have been slow to embrace the online generation, I'll just put it at that, is ramming headfirst and not necessarily caring about preserving WiiWare, or at least not publicly. They might be doing something to preserve these old games that we don't know about, that we'll find out in the future, but at least publicly it doesn't seem like they're doing that. And introducing a system like the Switch that does not have the option to actually own these old games, you kind of just have to understand that this is where we're going. The best that we can hope for is that they expand this online subscription to include some of these games, with the understanding that we never really own them and that they can go away at any time. But because that's true about so many things these days, that we don't own anything, that we pay for all types of subscriptions and you get them for as long as you get them, I guess I'm okay with it. I'm more concerned about the ability to play these games, and I have faith in Nintendo, especially if this is the last one, if this is the last subscription service where I pay for this service and they never take away these games from me unless they just fold and go under and Nintendo doesn't exist, then I would be okay with that. I just hope that they do spend the time later on to try to bring some of these games back into the fold. Right now it's just NES. I would love to see SNES. I would love to see, Game Boy Advance. I want them to go all the way, even if it means that they have to keep building onto this service well into the Switch successor and in the future, because maybe they won't bring N64 games or GameCube games onto the Switch, but they might do that for the successor. That's okay, as long as they keep building onto it. And I guess the best we can hope for is at that time, when they start bringing Wii games, for instance, or I hope that time comes, maybe they decide to bring WiiWare games as well. Games that were available on the Wii Shop channel that you can no longer buy, and now with the subscription service you can play games like Muscle March again. That's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I'm hoping for. But until that point, we just kind of have to look back and say this is the end of an old era for Nintendo. This is an end of an old initiative. This is what they cared about at the time. They care about different things now, and we have to make peace with it. So anyone who has a Wii, go play those games if you can. Go re-download them if you can, because if you don't, then you're going to lose that ability. And anyone who has a Wii U and a 3DS, and there are also games out there in the same exact situation where I'm sure those shops are going to shut down at some point in the future. We just talked about the 3DS. That 3DS is on its deathbed. I mean, the shop won't shut down, next year or anything like that, but it's going to happen. So think about that when you're thinking long-term about enjoying these experiences. And also, let's cross our fingers to hope that Nintendo does improve the service, and maybe one day we will be playing these games again. And that's it, guys. Those were all the topics I had planned to get into the show with. If you have any comments on anything, if you are you somber? Are you as somber about this WiiWare news as I was? I'm sorry to end on such what seemed like a low note. I'm trying to make it sound a little bit more upbeat and positive, but man, it's hard. It's hard with this one. Also, what do you think about all of this news about Switch sales and Mario Kart Tour and stuff like that? Anything that we talked about at all. If you want to join the discussion, or you want me to talk about anything in particular in a future episode, please reach me at heartcontainerspodcast@gmail.com or at RomeFawaz on Twitter. This has been Heart Containers, episode number 4 for Thursday, January 31st. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see y'all real soon.